everyone, my name is Amy, this is the Opinionated Woman, and welcome back to Crafty Reads, my series where we make some kind of art and I talk about the last 5 books that I've read. I don't anticipate this one being too much of a long one because of the types of books that I read, and also because I must be honest, I have been in a reading slump and it has been so frustrating. One of the most affected areas in this reading slump were audiobooks. I must have picked up and put down maybe 3 or 4 different books, and I just could not get them to grab my attention. It was very frustrating. So I think with the help of Terry Pratchett and some thrillers, I think I've gotten out of this reading slump now. Holding thumbs, but yeah, let's get into it. I haven't been, obviously it's been a while since my last Crafty Reads, but still working on this one. I'm going to be adding some gold bits in with this metallic pen. The first book I read was a reread, and that is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I actually reread it on audio, but I have the physical copy, so why not show it off, even though it's not very pretty. I probably want to deface it at some point to make it look nicer, but not anytime soon. I'm too busy crocheting right now. So, Northanger Abbey is Jane Austen's last book, and you can kind of tell, I think, as far as I can remember, when she died, they found this book in her effects, and it was published after she died, and you can kind of tell, to me, because her character development is usually so strong, and her protagonists usually have such a distinctive personality, and I just don't feel that Catherine Morland, who is a protagonist in this, really had that much of a strong character. I also feel like because it's, okay, let's just say, just in case you haven't heard about this book, Northanger Abbey is about Catherine Morland, who has gone for the season to Bath, where they go to the rooms and they socialize and they go to balls and they talk about muslins. I always liked reading Jane Austen's for that window into the past of how bizarre things used to be. It's not like I'm nostalgic for it, not a fuck. I mean, I'm an autistic gay woman who doesn't want to have children. I wouldn't have fitted in there. But it's so fascinating to read about. They will talk on about a fucking muslin for the longest time, and this Skinner about someone wearing the wrong type of ribbons. Good God. So from that kind of aspect, it was entertaining. And there were the twists and turns that you usually expect to find in a Jane Austen. But Catherine she meets somebody that she likes and his sister in Bath, and then she gets invited back to their manor, which is called Northanger Abbey, which is an old abbey that because she reads Gothic novels, she gets all these fancies in her head about what Northanger Abbey will be like. So we get a tiny bit of the Gothicness in that, but the way that it's described as her most Gothic book, I think, is a bit misleading to me, because it's not very Gothic, especially if you've read a Charlotte Bronte or a Bronte sister book, because those are far more Gothic. But I wasn't that invested, but this was the beginning of my reading slump. And I know this is the only Jane Austen that I've only read twice now. The rest of them I've read multiple times. So that should indicate, that this wasn't my favorite one overall. So I'm just going with the watercolor and trying to add some gold bits. I'm not sure where this is going. I'm just figuring it out as we go along. Then I picked up The Hand That First Held Mine by Maggie O'Farrell. Earlier this year, I read I Am by Maggie O'Farrell, which is her memoir. And I wanted to pick up one of her novels. I picked this up at a charity store for $10, so that was pretty sick. But it's one of those books that's hard to really tell you. It does have certain very important plot points, but a lot of this book is about the personal relations and the inner workings of the minds of the characters that we're in. And I really like books like that, where it's looking at character studies, very internal. And So we've got two timelines going on. We've got Ted and Alina in the present day. Alina's just had a baby, and it was a very traumatic birth. She doesn't remember a lot of it. She lost a lot of blood. It was like very intense. And she's really struggling with that and the fact that she can't remember it. And her husband doesn't seem to be, he doesn't want to answer her questions, because I think it was very traumatic for him too. But instead of thinking about her, he is being selfish about it. But in the undercurrents of the things that are going wrong with Alina, like, you know, the struggles that she's having, not being able to sleep, losing time, having the gap in her memory of that trauma that she experienced and not being able to actually process that trauma. Like, you can see the effects of that really strongly, but at the same time, something is happening with Ted. And he's having he has these episodes that he's had since he was a child, that are very clearly trauma responses of something that he's repressing or hasn't been told. And he keeps having these episodes, but we never see things from Ted's point of view, or we only get glimpses from Ted's point of view. Most of it's from Alina. So it's hard to figure out, it's very much you feel on the outside of what's happening to Ted, which I think is what Alina is feeling. So it's very well written. It is beautifully written. And then in the second timeline, we're in the 50s, and we're following Lexi, who meets this guy called, I think it's Inez, and she goes to London with him and starts this relationship, and she gets into the world of journalism. And we follow her along with these like different men. We follow her having a baby. We follow her life as a working woman with an unwed mother in the 50s, and she's just like got such a lot of like spunk and character, you know. She doesn't let things get in the way. Like she's good, just got a very, very strong character, and all of these characters you get very, very invested in, and then obviously these stories do come together at some point, but I don't want to tell you what that is, because obviously spoilers. But yeah, overall I really enjoyed it, and I definitely will pick up more from Maggie O'Farrell. And then we have the audiobook that I should have just DNF'd, and that's Lullaby by Leila Slimani. I can't remember the translator's name. I'm sorry about that. It's translated from French. So this is supposed to be a thriller about so we start off the book with this scene of this baby that's been killed, and the nanny has been arrested for it. And so you think it's going to be like this quite intense, like thriller vibe, and then it sort of goes back into the past and looks at the family when the nanny first joined, and what the nanny is like as a person, and how she interacts with the family. But I don't know whether this was, I smudged some shitty, oh no. Got gold on me now. So I don't know whether it was just the book itself, or because I was struggling to keep track of it, but I just kept on zoning in and out. It just wasn't grabbing my attention, and I'd like zone in and out, and then we'd be in a completely different scene, and I just couldn't bring myself to care. It was just very dry and told in a very boring way, and I love a slow book, I really do, and like give me some like a slow build, like for sure I'm here for that all day, but this just didn't feel like that. It was I don't know, I just kind of found it boring, and I don't know 100% whether that was my fault, because I really was struggling to pay attention to audiobooks. Maybe I should have put this one down and tried it another time, but you know what, I haven't heard that great reviews about this book, so I don't think it's something that I'm going to like return to. Then I read a non-fiction, and that's Wintering by Catherine May. My mom lent this to me. So it's a memoir, and what did they call it here? A meditation on the fallow periods of life, time where we must retreat to care for and repair ourselves. That's a perfect word, because I was trying to think of how to describe this, because I always like have a little go through the books in my mind before I sit down to write these books, to do these. I say write because that's what I do for a living, but before I sit down to actually do this video. And yeah, so it's about wintering. So in those times when you have like periods of cold, periods of downtime in your life, or when something bad has happened and you need to retreat into yourself to sort of repair yourself from within and to nurture yourself, and it's about that. And she said at the beginning of starting this book, she was thinking that she was going to go and like interview a bunch of people and do like a whole broad study on it. And actually, because wintering is such a personal and specific thing, she realized that her own story needed to be the focus of it. And it doesn't have like big massive events happening or anything like that. I mean, there's periods of her like taking a sick leave off of work and how she uses that time to repair herself. When she's pregnant with her child, she talks about like random little anecdotal things within her life to talk about wintering as a concept. And it's hard for me to actually portray that to you. I realize the more that I try and think about this book, the more I realize it's hard to communicate what it's about. But yeah, I thought it was like a really sweet meditation on this kind of like living slowly and taking time for yourself, which is something that I'm a huge proponent of. So yeah, I really like this book. And then finally, the book that I think is responsible for getting me out of my reading slump, and that's Hugo. And that's The Dark Hours by Michael Connelly. My mom just came here recently and she picked me up 2 thrillers at the airport, 2 new thrillers, and one of them was the Michael Connelly. And I have not picked up a Michael Connelly for a little bit. I think I listened to an audiobook of his a couple of months ago. But he's definitely one of my favorite thriller authors. I do definitely prefer this sort of investigator side of thrillers rather than the domestic side. Like if you watch my other wrap-ups or my One Last Try series, you'll see I struggle with domestic thrillers. But Michael Connelly has always been like a tried and true dude. So I went back to him and I was really glad. I finished this really quickly. We're following a police detective called Ballard, and she is working the midnight shift. And she's following this case for these 2 people called the Midnight Men, who are a 2-person gang of rapists who are targeting women on certain holidays. So we get into the story and it's New Year's Eve and she's working on this investigation. And then at New Year's, apparently it's like a tradition to do in LA, and this is wild and so fucking American, but they discharge their weapons into the sky. I was like, okay. So she gets a call that during this firing, someone's been shot. So she goes to investigate this, and on her investigation, she realizes that the gun that was involved in this was linked with the death, with a cold case that's linked to none other than Harry Bosch, which is his main protagonist for, Mike Connelly's main protagonist for a lot of his books. So we do sometimes, even when we're getting stories from another protagonist's point of view, we do get his other characters in there. So we get his lawyer, Mickey Haller. It's hard for me to say in my accent. There's Jack McAvoy, his interview man. They do link in each other's stories, which I do like, because I mean they're a lawyer, a cop, a private investigator, and a journalist. You know, they're all going to link at some point. So I did like that part. So we're following these cases as Ballard is investigating both of them and working with terrible partners. They're dealing with the pandemic. It's just after the George Floyd protests, so obviously the police are getting a lot of backlash from that, quite rightly, as like in her opinion as well. And yeah, I just feel like Michael Connelly has a really good, he paces his books really well. So there's a lot of like build up and tension and finding out different things, and then he'll throw some twists your way, and then there'll be like 2 main peaks of the drama. So there'll be like the first one and then the second one, and then right after the second like big bit of action, you get like a little twist ending some of the time. And this had one that I was like, oh, hectic. Like he really like he goes there with his books. So yeah, I really enjoyed the way it ended, and it really helped me get through my reading slump, and I'm really on to the next thriller. So yeah. Well, that's it. That is all. Thank you for joining me for this Crafty Reads. I much appreciate it. If you've read any of these books, comment down below. Tell me what you thought about them. And yes, until next time, if you want to support my channel, you can buy me a coffee at my coffee link down below at The Opinionated Woman. Or you can just like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And I'll see you next time.